Today we're going to be going over our Week 17 power rankings for the 2025 NFL season. And let's not waste any time. Let's get into one of the last power ranking videos that we're going to make for this season. Starting off with the first tier of teams, we have the Jets at 32, the Raiders at 31, the Giants at 30, and then the Browns at 29. Raiders have been one of the worst teams in my power rankings, but they hung in there with Houston. Ashton Jeanty had a great game. They only lost by 2, and the Jets got blown out by the Saints, losing to them by 23. So I think it was fair to swap the Raiders and the Jets, but I wasn't going to put the Jets or the Raiders too high because they still lost, and I still think teams like the Giants and the Browns and every other team has been better than them, but I did think they deserved to not be last after a solid game against a very good Houston team, as well as what the Jets did versus the Saints. Giants at 30, I mean, you lose to the J.J. McCarthy-less Vikings. That's not really great. Jackson Dart really didn't play that good of a game. The run game was all right, but again, I mean, their defense played pretty good against Max Brosmer and McCarthy, only allowing 16 points, but it is a good Vikings defense. I still think they're better than the Raiders and the Jets, but they do go down 2 spots after losing to a Vikings team that didn't have McCarthy the whole game. And the Browns at 29, similar to the Raiders, yes, it was a loss, but they competed with a very good team. The Raiders lost to the Texans on the road by 2, and the Browns at home only lost to the Bills by 3, and that's without Judkins for a little bit of the game. So that was a good performance from the Browns. I was very impressed. Shedeur had some interceptions. They weren't all his fault, to be honest. But the defense, once again, is what really impressed me with Cleveland. Doing a pretty. They didn't do a good job against James Cook, but not many people have. But in the past game, they did pretty well, which has normally been their strength this season. But again, similar to the Raiders, those two teams with very competitive losses against very good teams bumps them up 1 spot each. Next here we have is the Commanders at 28, the Titans at 27, and the Cardinals at 26. Commanders at 28. It wasn't a horrible performance against the Eagles. At least it didn't start off that way. They only got bad once Mariota got injured, to be honest. But before Mariota was out, they were actually playing pretty well. Terry McLaurin had some big catches. Deebo Samuel had that one big play, but they were playing pretty good. And then it all went downhill when Mariota was out. It's not the end of the world to lose to the Eagles without your starting quarterback for most of the game. But I do think they deserve to go to 28, and the only reason they really went to 28 is because the Titans get their big win over the Chiefs. Yes, it's a Chiefs team with basically missing like half their starters, it feels like. And not only did they not have Mahomes, they didn't even have Gardner Minshew. They had Chris Oladokun at quarterback. So I'm not going to like skyrocket them for beating the Chiefs or even put the Chiefs below them. But they got a win by almost 20 points where the Commanders got a loss, so they go up 2 spots to 27. And the Cardinals, it just was an underwhelming game against the Falcons, in my opinion. I really thought Jacoby Brissett would be able to do more. The Falcons' defense has been struggling recently, especially in the pass department, so I thought that would be perfect opportunity for Jacoby Brissett, who played pretty good in that Houston Texans game last week. But I was a bit underwhelmed with what I saw from Jacoby Brissett. Michael Carter had a good game. Elijah Higgins was really the star in the receiving room. Michael Wilson didn't even have a crazy game outside of that insane touchdown he had. Trey McBride only had 27 yards. Marvin Harrison didn't do a lot. It was really just Elijah Higgins. I think that if Elijah Higgins is their leading receiver, I think we know they're not going to have a great game offensively, and that's what the case was. And on the Falcons side, they let Bijan have another good game. Kyle Pitts had a good game, but it was just an underwhelming performance from the Falcons or from the Cardinals. And then when we get to this next tier, you'll see exactly why the Cardinals are set at 26. Because the next tier we have the Saints at 25, the Falcons who beat them at 24, the Chiefs at 23, the Dolphins at 22, and the Bengals at 21. Saints with their blowout win against the Jets. Basically, they beat the Jets and the Cardinals lost to the Falcons. That's why they go up 1 spot. And the Falcons go up 1 spot as well for beating the Cardinals. It was an impressive performance from the Falcons' defense. I'll give them that. And their offense, Bijan played well. But again, the main reason they went up is just because they beat the Cardinals. And The Cardinals were at 24. The Falcons were at 25. So they basically switched spots, and the Saints jumped them for beating the Jets, essentially. Chiefs at 23, going down 3 spots. I didn't want to punish them. I know getting blown up by the Titans, who I had at 29 going into the week, probably should be more than 3 spot decrease. But if you just look at how many players weren't in that game, the fact that Gardner Minshew got injured, I didn't want to punish the Chiefs too much for getting blown out by the Titans just because half their team wasn't playing. They're still gonna go. They still went down 3 spots from 20 to 23, but I think if the Chiefs team was fully healthy, or not fully healthy, but if the Chiefs team had even Gardner Minshew at quarterback and barely, they could have not only beat the Titans, but I think they would still beat teams like Atlanta, New Orleans, Arizona if they had Minshew and some of their other players healthy. So I don't want to punish the Chiefs too much. I still think they're above at the top of that bottom 8 tier of teams like the Cardinals, again, the Falcons and Saints. And then the Bengals and Dolphins, the Bengals basically just jumped the Dolphins because they beat them by 20 plus. The offense played pretty good. I expected that to be the case. I didn't expect Chase Brown to have the game that he had. That was crazy. With his 3 touchdowns that he basically had in like a quarter. And I didn't expect much from Miami. Quinn Ewers, it wasn't it wasn't a horrible performance from Quinn Ewers. It could have definitely gone worse, but maybe part of that was because he was playing the Bengals. Um, but Devon Achane had a good game, so that's about expected. I still think the Dolphins are currently better than the Chiefs, but the Bengals just beat them by 20, so that's why they jump up from 23 to 21. Next tier, we have a bigger tier here. We have the Vikings at 20, the Bucks at 19, the Cowboys at 18, the Ravens at 17, the Panthers at 16, the Colts at 15, and the Lions at 14. Vikings go up 1 spot for their win over the Giants, as well as the Chiefs' loss to the Titans. That's why they go up a spot. I kept the Buccaneers at 19 just because it's a division matchup against a solid Panthers team. They almost beat them, and I still would take them over teams like Minnesota, Cincinnati, and Miami. Dallas goes down 1 spot. It's not bad. I mean, losing to the Chargers isn't the end of the world. It's a good Chargers team, don't get me wrong. But the Panthers winning their game against Tampa Bay is basically the only reason why the Cowboys went down a spot. Same thing with the Ravens, because I didn't want to punish the Ravens too much because Lamar was out. Even though the Ravens just haven't looked great even with Lamar. I was tempted to keep the Ravens at 16. Well, not keep them, but drop them from, yeah, keep them at 16 and have the Panthers just be at 17. But I'm like, the Panthers have been the better team, in my opinion. And yeah, the Panthers have been very inconsistent, but so have the Ravens, especially on offense. And the Panthers, again, got their win against Tampa Bay, whereas the Ravens lost to New England. If the Ravens didn't choke a lead like they did, maybe they'd stay at 16. If they just barely lost to the Patriots and it was a close game all the way. But they had a good solid lead. They could have gave Derrick Henry the ball at the end of the game. They could have easily won it. So that's also a reason why they dropped to 17. And as we said, the Panthers going up from 18 to 16 after their big divisional win against the Buccaneers. We'll see. They got Seattle this week, but I don't even know how much that game matters. I think it's just going to come down to because I think the Bucks and Panthers play each other at the end of the year. So I think that's what's going to really determine the division. But again, they go up 2 spots for their big win. I almost moved them above teams like Detroit and Indy, but Detroit has had a lot of injuries on the defensive side, and they've had a tough schedule. They're still the same record as the Panthers. And then the Colts, honestly, their offense played pretty decent. I know it's San Fran, and their defense is super banged up, but Phillip Rivers and that Colts offense did not look bad. It was their defense that really played terrible. But then the week before against Seattle, their offense didn't do much, but their defense played pretty well. So if they can get the defensive performance that they had against Seattle and the offensive performance they had against San Fran, that's a pretty solid team right there. So that's why they stay above the Panthers, even though they did lose. And then Detroit, Detroit was also at 11 to begin with. So I didn't want to move them down too far. I think it was just right to put them below the Steelers, which you'll see here in tier 2 with the Steelers at 13, the Eagles at 12, and the Chargers at 11. Essentially, the Lions' loss to the Steelers bumps them down to 14, which allows the Chargers to go up from 12 to 11 after their win against the Cowboys, and allows the Eagles to go up from 13-12 with their win against the Commanders. And then the Steelers could jump up 2 spots because they just beat the Lions as well as the Lions. The Lions losing, if the Steelers beat anyone else, they still would have jumped up. But because they beat the Lions, they go up even more from 15 to 13 because their offense is playing pretty good recently. I've been very impressed with what I've seen from the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. And their defense, they did a good job against Jahmyr Gibbs, but in the past game, they didn't do too great in that Detroit game. But overall, it was a good performance from Pittsburgh, and they've definitely picked it up offensively these last 2 or 3 weeks. Philly, they beat a Marcus Mariota / Josh Johnson Commanders team. Again, it's a win that they needed to get. I'm pretty sure that clinched them the division, but I'm not going to put them up 3-4 spots from that game. And then the Chargers again. It was a good win against the Cowboys. Their win against the Cowboys was more impressive than the Eagles' win against the Commanders, and the Chargers recently beat the Eagles, which is why I kept them 1 spot ahead of the Eagles. But they both went up essentially because the Lions went down. Next tier, we have the Niners at 10, the Texans at 9, the Packers at 8, the Bears at 7, and the Broncos at 6. Now, there's a lot of teams who went down here, and a lot of them won. Or I guess 2 of them won in Houston and San Fran. But you'll see the reason why those teams went down in a minute. If you see with the Broncos being at 6, I think you can get an idea of why those teams went down. San Fran, they just took care of business against the Colts. Offense played very well. Defense, not so much. But again, they only went down because a team that we'll talk about later had a very impressive performance, which is why they went down a spot. Same thing with the Texans. Honestly, the Texans, I think, low-key deserve to go down a spot because they barely beat the Raiders. They let the Raiders put up 21 points on them. But again, if it wasn't for the team that we'll get into at number 5, they would have stayed at 8. Packers went down a spot just because the Bears beat them. Again, it would have been the Bears at 8 and the Packers at 7. If the Packers had won, maybe the Packers would have been at 6, but because the Bears got a win, the Bears stayed at 7 instead of going down a spot, and the Packers should be -2, by the way. The Packers went down 2 spots from 6 to 8. And then the Broncos, after their loss to the Jags, go down 3 spots to number 6. It wasn't the end of the world. I'm not too concerned for Denver, just because they did get that very important win against Green Bay 2 weeks ago, not too long ago. So I don't want to overreact too much. But the defense didn't play great against on a very red-hot Jags offense. Bo Nix didn't play too bad though. I wasn't mad at what I saw from Bo Nix. RJ Harvey had a very good game. But basically every team in front of them outside the Rams got a win last week. So that's why they jumped down. And the reason they also went down to 6 instead of maybe 3 or 4 or 5 is because the Jags are at 5 after their win, as we talked about, over the Broncos, going from 10 to 5. I'm still not 1,000,000% bought in on the Jags, but their offense has played very well. Their defense, especially in the run game department, has played well. And I think they deserve to be in the top 5. I'm still putting them at 5 because I think the 4 teams ahead of them have just been better overall. But they're right there at 5. And again, that's why the Broncos went down the 3 spots they did, is to be right below the Jags, which is also why teams like Houston and San Fran went down a spot, is because I think the Jags deserve to be in that top 5, which obviously ended up pushing Houston and San Fran down. And then at number 4, these are just going to be teams that went up due to Denver going down. New England gets their win against the Ravens. I mean, it was a nice comeback. Drake May played very well. It's not like the most impressive win, but it's a good win for New England. But again, the main reason they went up is because Denver went down. Same thing with Buffalo. It wasn't the prettiest win against Cleveland. The offense struggled a little bit in the pass department. But again, going up 1 spot due to Denver going down below Jacksonville. And then at number 2, we have the Rams after they lost to the Seahawks, which obviously puts Seattle at number 1. I didn't want to put the Rams too far down. I know they were up by a lot of points and they blew the lead to Seattle, but I don't want to put the Rams too far down. I still think you could argue that they're still the best team in football, but you got to give the Seahawks their respect for coming back in that game and winning it. So that's why they're number 1. But I still think the Rams are number 2, if not still number 1. So I think those are clearly the top 2 teams in the league still. But you got to give the Seahawks their love for going in there and making that comeback win. But that will conclude our power rankings for Week 17. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.